Here's T1J. Why aren't there more black
Socialists of
socialists?
America, or DSA, is the largest socialist organization in the United States, with almost 100,000 members, the vast majority of whom joined in the last 7 years. Socialists continue to fight an uphill battle for.
I know a lot of you said, like, this is a FN signifier. It's not. You guys self-reported. This is T1J, who, by the way, is, if I'm not mistaken, not a socialist anyway. He's, oh, come on, stop. People, nice bathroom. People don't know that you're black, okay? When you make jokes like this, oh God, I can't wait for you to get clipped out by some fucking random, like, orbiter weirdo that's like, Hasan's white ass fucking mods, like, don't know that this is a different black man. You know what I mean? And then they're gonna fucking dox you and shit, and then they're gonna find out that you're black. But you know,
relevance in America, but there's no doubt they've been having a moment for the past few years, almost certainly sparked by the sudden popularity of Senator Bernie Sanders, who I'll talk about later. The vast majority of DSA members, however, are straight, cis, white male millennials. It is decidedly white up in there. Now, not every American socialist is a member of DSA, but many people have made the argument that these lefties have a bit of a diversity problem. For some masochistic reason, I've decided to talk about that today. That's what this video is about. This video is sponsored by the Curiosity Stream and Nebula bundle. Nebula is a streaming video platform that is owned by the people who create content for it, so you know it's good. Hey look, it's me. I like to say that Nebula is kind of like YouTube, except with all the bad videos.
listen, I'm gonna watch this ad thoroughly. You know why? Because if I end up criticizing his takes, at least the least I could have done is like shown the video, watch the ad. I'm being careful. My own moderation team is promoting this video so that I get fucking canceled, okay? Because they love it. Everybody in this community is a little freak, okay?
Filtered out, leaving only the most interesting and informative videos from your favorite content creators, without all the annoying stuff like pre-roll ads or algorithms preventing your favorite creators' videos from showing up in your feed.
You be discussing the FTP and DSA-LA drama? No, and I hope he doesn't either. I don't want to. Oh God. Oh fuck. I don't. There is genuinely, I think the same exact problems with black communities being underserved exists and happens within every avenue, every facet of American existence, including the DSA as well.
Feeds. There's also a lot of genuinely awesome original content on Nebula that you won't find on YouTube or anywhere. Curiosity, thought-provoking shopping would cause a essays and short films. If you use my deal, to less than. Click the link in the description to check it out. Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
Growing up, my family mostly lived in urban, lower-income, all-black neighborhoods, also known as the hood. When I was a little kid, I just enjoyed life and played with my G.I. Joes or my NES, but over time, I realized that those video games I loved so much weren't pulled from thin air by my parents. They cost money, and although my parents worked very hard to give me and my siblings as comfortable a life as possible, I became acutely aware of the fact that my family didn't have all that much money compared to some other folks. And I wanted to figure out how to fix that, not only for myself and my family, but other people in the community. Trying to find a good job was a potential option. I could conceive of the possibility that not all black people were broke, but every adult in my community had traditional jobs, many of whom seemed very intelligent and hardworking, and they still mostly struggled and sacrificed. I was skeptical of that one off the jump. Now, when you're a young black boy in the hood and you're looking for black people to study and emulate who made better lives for themselves, you might recall that there's plenty of wealthy black rappers, singers, actors, comedians, athletes, and other celebrities. Some of those folks started out in the hood and found a way to get some white folks to give them a shit ton of money. And these folks weren't just living well, they were thriving and taking care of their families and communities and enjoying the finer things in life. As I grew older, I learned more about politics and the economy and government corruption and corporate greed, and I realized that it would take major systemic reform to even begin to tackle the problem of poverty in general, much less within the Black community. Black people were never going to rap or slam dunk their way out of poverty. We can't all be Denzel or Jay-Z or Oprah, and we shouldn't have to be. Whether or not we get to keep our lights on should not depend on our ability to entertain white people. But the fact remains that was pretty much the only solution to Black poverty that I had ever seen work in real life. And that's honestly kind of still the case. Most tried and true methods of wealth production either require you to already have money, like investing or starting your own business, which is very difficult for most poor people, or they require you to have or be willing and able to develop a marketable skill that someone will pay you large amounts of money for, like being a great lawyer or athlete, which is very often expensive itself if you have to pay for education and training, and is arguably harder to pull off because it often requires a lot of good luck and being in the right place at the right time. You might be able to sing and dance just like Beyonce, but if your daddy works 2 jobs and your mama's old beat up car won't start, you might not make it to that important audition. The systems of building wealth in America are usually out of reach for poor and working class people, and often middle class people as well. And it's even more difficult for Black people who are essentially starting from behind due to America's legacy of racism and oppression. And I think it's clear that's at least partially by design. Rich people have demonstrated over time that by and large, they like getting richer, but they can't get richer if everyone else is also getting richer. There are a lot of resources available, absolutely, but it is still a finite amount. And one of the most valuable resources that wealthy people have is political power, especially in America, which has legalized unlimited donations to organizations associated with political campaigns and literally bribing sitting legislators. All this is utilized to mold the laws of the land, which, among other awful things,
It sounds like a socialist, but he's not. What is he? I don't know. I think TJ's he is like a social democrat, I think. But I don't know why I'm looking at this like as though it's gonna be there, but
ensures that most wealth continues to be funneled to the already wealthy. In my opinion, this is one of the most problematic aspects of capitalism, and anyone who wishes to preserve capitalism would need to provide a cogent solution to this. But this whole time, in the background, there were these little voices, little hands raising up in the back of the class. Well, if this system is so bad and causes so much inequality, why don't we do a different one? No one really took these voices too seriously, and depending on what era of history it was, saying shit like that could literally be considered treason. But with the advent of the internet and social media, these voices got louder.
I think the main point, especially as it pertains to the main point of this video, is that those voices were silenced, and if they were white voices, they were silenced. If they were Black voices, they were killed. Like, part of the reason why there isn't a robust Black left movement in this country, even though, at least according to Karl Marx, even, was it Karl Marx? I don't know. A lot of people, a lot of socialist thinkers, including Black socialist and communist thinkers, have seen the environment ripe for radicalization and the revolutionary potential of Black people in America. And they were correct. And there is historic precedent for this. But of course, the American government was not too fond of the American government was not too fond of Black leftist movements.
And more organized. And as political corruption and the obvious failings of American capitalism kept being put on full display over and over again, these people started to sound a little more persuasive. If Twitter were any indication of the state of society, which it is not, thank God, you might think these people were now the majority. But yeah, maybe we do need to do something different. The rising popularity of Bernie Sanders should be remembered as a pivotal arc in American history, in my opinion. Bernie Sanders is a United States senator who is known for his long history of championing socially and economically progressive policies like single-payer healthcare, free college, and workplace democracy. He ran for president twice, and although he failed to secure the nomination both times, his unexpected popularity was remarkable and unprecedented. It's not that his views and positions are so groundbreaking. There have been plenty of American political figures with similar or more radical views, and a lot of Sanders' policy proposals have already been on the books in other countries for years. But Bernie Sanders somehow managed to craft an unambiguous, uncompromising platform of social democracy and make the people of the United States, as well as the mainstream media, take it seriously. I don't know that anyone else had done that before. Like, for example, in 2009, newly elected President Barack Obama was trying to garner support for the healthcare bill that quickly became known as Obamacare. The main point of the bill was to expand access to health insurance. It didn't make health insurance free. It didn't even really make it cheaper for most people. It just made it so that more people had it, which I think is still better than how it was before. That's just me though. Obama and his allies had a lot of trouble selling this to Congress, even to Democrats, and they were forced to make a lot of concessions, notably including the removal of a public healthcare option, which would have provided cheap, if not free healthcare for those having trouble paying for private health insurance, and could have potentially forced private companies to compete by lowering their own prices or providing higher quality healthcare. Fast forward a few years and we've got Bernie Sanders hoping to succeed Barack Obama, running for president as a Democrat. And this guy not only wants healthcare to be universally accessible, he says he's gonna make it completely free. Obamacare this ain't. And again, Bernie Sanders is not the first politician to propose free universal healthcare, but I think he's the first American politician to make people take it, as well as a host of other progressive policies, seriously in a big way. A whole video could be done examining exactly how he was able to do that, little out of the scope of this one though. But there's no question that Bernie Sanders captured the hearts and minds of American voters and was a serious candidate that had a real shot of securing the presidency. And even though he failed to do that, his popularity definitely forced the Democratic Party to rethink their whole brand. To the extent that the second time Bernie Sanders ran for president, a surprising number of his Democratic opponents supported some form of free healthcare. And in general, many observers, including myself, would say that the Democratic Party has undergone a leftward shift since Sanders' presidential bid. But let's not get crazy. There's still the same liberal capitalist Democrats we so adore. Another very interesting thing about Bernie Sanders is that he openly identifies as a democratic socialist, and he used that identification as part of his messaging while campaigning.
Well, we're going to win because first we're going to explain what democratic socialism is. And what democratic socialism is about is saying that it is immoral and wrong that the top 0.1% in this country own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%.
There's debate about just how socialist his actual policy proposals are. Sanders supported large...
They were not. They were in every sense of the word trying to bring America into a 21st century social democracy status with robust social safety nets, and that's it. And that is still I think a very smart thing to do, and I fully supported him and will forever fully support him.
Scale reforms to the American economic system, but he never quite suggested dismantling its capitalist foundation. But as far as I know, this is consistent with the positions of many democratic socialists who believe we should take incremental steps towards socialism, starting with practical reforms of the current capitalistic system. Of course, some socialists don't agree with this, believing that capitalism is evil and should be destroyed immediately. A common American trope is our misunderstanding and demonization of socialism. To be fair, socialism is an incredibly complex concept that's made even more complex by the fact that a lot of people have adopted it as part of their personal identity, which inevitably adds a layer of subjectivity to its definition. But of course, a big part of American discomfort with socialism is a carryover from the Red Scare propaganda that was rampant during and immediately after the World Wars, and has arguably been reignited through America's tense relationship with China.
I'll take this case to the Supreme Court. The Our decision is as follows. No more private property. No more you.
Americans are constantly told that all forms of socialism are evil and bad. We're never really quite told why. Evil is kind of just baked into the definition, kind of like fascism. We know it's bad even if we don't really know what it is. Either way, it's not something most American politicians want to be associated with. You could be—
I disagree. I think we know why fascism is bad, and most people kind of understand it, especially because like we own the fascists, you know what I mean? And like they were doing like genocide and stuff like that, right? But in that same sense, like communism or socialism as completely separated, because fascism is a tool of control as far as ideologies goes, whereas socialism is a different economic organization of society that is not like capitalism. Right? But people don't really get to the weeds of it at all. And they will just say socialism is evil and bad in a way where like fascism is taught in schools as to why it's bad. Whereas they kind of land on Red Scare propaganda and just don't really have to define it beyond that.
The most neoliberal corporatist of all time, as a large amount of American politicians are. But if you say that the government should spend money on anything, you very well might be called a socialist, usually by Republicans. But Democrats have historically been just as hostile to the idea of socialism as Republicans are, most likely believing that it would alienate them from more moderate voters. And also because
Republicans aren't scared of the USSR anymore. They worship the Pootler. What? Bro. In what planet is Vladimir Putin even remotely socialist? Like, or communist, or he's just a kleptocratic authoritarian capitalist. He is very much the product of American Western intervention in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR. He was, and kind of in many respects still is, our guy. The Pootler. You don't understand Putinism, but Pootler is a mega commie.
almost all of them are literally not socialists.
I'm not a socialist. I'm a mainstream Democrat, and I have been.
So Bernie Sanders proudly identifying as a socialist would seem to be political suicide. And let's be honest, maybe it did have something to do with why he ultimately failed to win the Democratic nomination. I recall the obnoxious discourse about electability. But it wasn't the huge blow to his esteem that you might expect given our political climate. Bernie Sanders made socialist less of a naughty word. Despite the almost fairy tale success of Bernie Sanders, there was one very notable and ongoing shortcoming that plagued him throughout both of his bids for president.
Throughout the campaign, Sanders struggled to match the support Clinton received from black voters.
The fact of the matter is Joe Biden beat Bernie Sanders by 40 points with African-American voters.
The core of the question is about, as president, what would you do with the rise of white supremacist violence to protect our communities?
Absolutely. I know I date myself a little bit here, but I actually was at the March on Washington with Dr. King back in 1963.
This man used the "I have a black friend" defense about Martin Luther King Jr. The political—
But it's true. I don't know, look. Like but he did. The honest perspective to look at here is that Joe Biden beat Bernie Sanders on black voters, despite the fact that he lied about his bona fides and activism in the civil rights space and actually actively worked to undermine legislative actions taken in the aftermath of the civil rights movement, like calling forced busing, like calling out forced busing and claiming that desegregated schools are going to create a racial jungle. Lying about getting arrested to visit Nelson Mandela. And yet it didn't matter because despite his friendship with Strom Thurmond, who he eulogized, by the way, who was a white supremacist, who he actually wrote legislation with, that eviscerated the black community. What needs to be examined in this situation, is like why the media narrative was so successful in saying that Bernie Sanders doesn't care about black people, he hates black people, when all of his fucking policies are still disproportionately helpful to the American black population. And he still got fucking owned by a dude who was just Obama's friend, a dude who was brought on as the VP to basically try and save the cackling white supremacists who were terrified at the prospect of a black American president, the first black American president. You know, I think that is a genuinely interesting conversation, which plays a central role in this "Why aren't there more black socialists" video.
The left is often accused of participating in identity politics, which essentially describes political agendas that are mostly, if not fully, informed by a person's race, gender, sexuality, religion, or other identity group. The modern Democratic Party in America has largely embraced identity politics as a core part.
Disproportional, nah, fam, adequate. Yeah, I didn't use the right word there. Well, not even adequately. No, it is definitely, like, I've talked about this so much that I feel like I'm just basically repeating myself, but one of the worst parts about American politics and how racialized American politics is that we never really think about, like, healthcare, right? Universal healthcare as a expressly pro-black agenda, right? What do you have to talk about if you want to appeal to black voters, right? Criminal justice reform, reform on sentencing, reform on like drugs, right? Decriminalization. Like that's usually what, not me, I'm saying like what MSNBC and mainstream media markets as like a black first policy, right? It's rarely ever about reparations. It's never about reparations. It's rarely ever about, police brutality. That's I also consider that to be under the umbrella of criminal justice reform, right? That's how it's used. No one ever sees the same like if we're looking at, bro, turn the vid down. The video is frozen, you fucking weirdos. Calm down. I turned it down, okay? Shut the fuck up. Jesus Christ. One of the most frustrating parts about this is that black communities are still targeted with classist violence, regardless of the additional compounding effect of white supremacist racial violence. On top of the compounding effect of racial violence, the outcomes of that racial violence are still filtered through a class first, a classist form of violence. Black people aren't just like the material side of the material realities that black people are subjected to are still done from the lens of class, are still done through the crosshairs of class, not necessarily through exclusively people going around and being like, you're black, you're not going to get a job. Well, even that itself still is a classist violence too. I'm not doing a good job describing this. I got like stun locked a little bit on the fucking volume thing. But basically what I'm trying to say is it's very frustrating that the American media has done a very good job of separating all matter of social progress being very good, overwhelmingly good for black and brown communities. Okay? And the hyper focus on you know, the only way like that you as a candidate want to make it seem like you're pro-black, pro-brown people is if you are only focusing on criminal justice reform, which Bernie Sanders, of course, had adequate measures for as well. But I wish that we lived in a society where we understood that when someone talks about medical debt, when someone talks about, and people are kind of doing this now, educational debts, because black people have a disproportionately higher rate of students that have taken on an additional amount of loans, right? That's a very real thing. So when you're only taking down $10K worth of student loan debt, you're actually technically saying like, hey, even if you're like upper middle class, you're fine. But if you're lower middle class, especially as black people usually are, more likely to be, even black people seeking out education are more likely to be coming from a less wealthy background than white people are. We're not going to eliminate more of your student loan debt. But when it's a liberal doing it, no one ever looks at it from that perspective. One of the things that always frustrated me was Jim Clyburn. Okay? I hate Jim Clyburn. He's such a fucking awful person. He's such an awful politician. He is horrifyingly bad for his community. And obviously he is an elitist. He's gotten billions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry. And for that reason, he's been a champion of the pharmaceutical industry. He's been a champion against any kind of movement that would harm the bottom line of the insurance industry, right? Jim Clyburn would shit on Bernie all the time and prop up Joe Biden as a great person, as a great example of like a true statesman that would help the black community. Meanwhile, what was deeply frustrating is that like Bernie's advocacy for Medicare for all would be significantly more impactful for Clyburn's constituency, okay? His predominantly black constituency that is incredibly poor and not doing well and is saddled with a fuckload of medical debt. They would all greatly benefit from any kind of socialization efforts towards fixing our fundamentally flawed, broken healthcare system. But because of our lens of understanding black issues, most Americans never think about medical debt or healthcare as a issue that black people are disproportionately dealing with. We never think about education in a similar capacity. We never think about that because everyone is conditioned by the media to think, oh, the only policies that help black and brown people are just criminal justice reform. Raising the minimum wage. Any matter of material restitution offered to the working poor in the United States of America, okay, is going to disproportionately target black and brown communities because the inverse of that is true. Black and brown communities have been historically undermined through class-based violence. They've been subjected to racial violence, which is a compounding factor upon that class-based violence.
Part of his messaging, and these ideas are generally mainstream in progressive culture. Republicans kind of also engage in identity politics, except they do it in a more dog whistly kind of way. However, a lot of people dislike identity politics for various reasons, another thing about which I could make an entire video. But one major assertion that some make is that identity politics misses the forest for the trees, that there are more fundamental problems that once solved may address many of the issues that seem specific specific to certain identities. Some people even go so far as to say that a focus on identity politics will lead to the entire collapse of society.
And so that's the fundamental danger of that group identity, victimizer, victim narrative, is that you fragment your identity in multiple dimensions. You'll find out that you're a victimizer, and then everyone's a criminal, and then everyone's guilty. That's exactly what happened in Russia.
And this is a frequent criticism of left-wing politics, but it's a criticism that also comes from within the left itself, and often from socialists like Bernie Sanders.
One of the struggles that you're going to be seeing in the Democratic Party is whether we go beyond identity politics.
This is why the media ate his ass up and said he was like a fucking racist. When in fact, Bernie Sanders was routinely addressing, of course he recognized and addressed racial violence, white supremacy, and all of that. But his ultimate message was to align on the basis of class, to hit the largest percentage of people as possible and help them recognize their class position and help them recognize that united they are stronger together. Okay, united they are stronger. That's how intersectionality works.
Messages like this tend to be unappealing to politically engaged members of marginalized groups. It may feel as if they're being told that they're concerned.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, P1J's audience might his black audience, judging by Bernie Sanders' electoral performance in the black community by age, would most likely not appreciate this too. They probably would fucking criticize him. Because if you look at anyone under the age of 30, Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly wins that. That's just how it is. Readings from 2019 is maddening. It's literally what you were saying. Bernie laying out his class-based policy ideas, and people were asking, okay, but what about black people? Black voters get mad that Bernie marched with MLK. They want to know what he'll do for them now. I disagree with this, and I think other black people will disagree with it. They hate when SJWs do SJW shit. I think that there is a leftist argument against identity politics or whatever people consider to be identity politics. Okay, there is a leftist criticism of that because it's pandering and it's bullshit, and most people I think recognize it as pandering and bullshit for the most part. So I don't know how to fix that by fixing the communications on it. I don't know how to fix the comms on it. You know what I mean? There's really a modern black leftist who writes on this called Adolph Reed. Not to use the friend thing, but I know a lot of POC leftists that dislike identity politics. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't like it because it's just fucking pandering. It's used as a weapon. It's like it's not. That's why you see some of the most racist motherfuckers use it against people like me whenever they see fit. Okay? Just like I weaponize the top of the hour ad break on you at the top of the hour when there's a 6-second ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or for free. And I totally forgot to run it. And now it's 4:24. So I'm going to run it now at 4:24. Thank you. What it do for the 10 get the subs and Econ Mang for the 5 get the subs, allowing 15 people to no longer see the ads. You can also, if you're not lucky enough to get gifted a sub, avoid the ad breaks on your own for $5 a month or for free with a Twitch Prime. Here's the one I'm going to add right now. Nobody likes it, Paul. Good policy that address class subjugation will also address racial marginalization. Yes, 100%.
concerns either aren't real or don't matter. And this was emphasized because almost every time Bernie Sanders talked about race, he found a way to change the subject.
And they are standing up today saying that we do not want young African Americans to be afraid about walking the streets, because they may get beaten up or murdered by police officers. But it goes beyond that. If you're looking at that generation today, those young people who are marching, my guess is 25% of them do not have jobs because we're looking at massive unemployment today.
Yeah.
You're looking at young people who cannot afford to go to college or coming out of school deeply in debt. We're looking at 100 million Americans.
Wait, he didn't avoid it. What the fuck? He literally is saying the plight of the black community goes beyond criminal justice reform, which is absolutely important to address. But beyond that, there are also, he's not switching topics at all. He just said that's important. He's not avoiding it. I think Bernie had the same issue that you do, which is that you may appeal to a broad audience that includes black people, but the vast majority don't feel you because you aren't specifically targeting your messaging to them. So you may mean well, but many don't hear you or see you because they flock to the people that look like them, usually who talk like them and can level with them. It's kind of hard to solve. No, there is a way to solve it. There is a very real criticism, I guess you can launch towards leftist spaces being devoid of more black voices. That much is true. It's same for me too. I don't have a lot of black leftist representation in here. I have black representation in this stream, obviously. I have black friends that come over, black content creators that I routinely collaborate with. But aside from that, I don't actually have like a lot of black leftist content creators that speak out. D1J just made a video about how much he hates Bernie, not the historical reason for why there are no black socialists. Is the problem with this video. I mean, I think that this is an interesting video regardless. Well, I did have Chris Smalls on. That's true. But they're not like a permanent fixture on this broadcast. You know what I mean? Anyway, everybody chill out for a second. Never seen a black person on the stream minus Chris Smalls. Yeah, well, maybe it's because you're a fucking political watcher and don't tune in when I do anything else outside of politics. I feel like TJ wants Bernie to pander to the black community more. This is interesting. I mean, but there's not really anything you can do here other than if you think that this is someone moving the conversation away from like black people problems, if that's what you want to call it. I don't know what the best way to address that is. Then it's really difficult to come to a conclusion on that conversation. Like, it's just, guys, please stop naming every black person that has been on the stream every time someone says there aren't that many black people on the stream. Okay, that it's just like it's like such a white person thing to do. Here, let me name the black people. Like, okay, yes, there are plenty of black people that come on the stream. Okay, that's not a thing I think about like that. Hannah says, why are the white folks keeping a list? Yeah. Every time I felt like I wasn't being represented because there was a black person on screen. I think the historical reason as to why socialism or there's not a lot of black representation within socialist movements, or why there aren't many more black socialists, is because they were murdered. Like, a lot. They were murdered pretty aggressively. And then on top of that, they were murdered. There was another murdering of their own background, their historical background, their attitudes, their legitimate socialist inclinations that they very openly stated in broad daylight, like MLK. So that's it. I think that's a big part of it. Okay, so there's that. There's that historical reason for it. And then the secondary reason is that every facet of American existence, even one that focuses on emancipation, is still an American movement. And if it's an American movement, it's going to have white supremacist elements. That is just the truth. Okay? So even if it's straight up a fucking, even if it's a DSA or even the PSL or any other fucking movement, okay? It is still always going to have a touch of you know, a touch of racialized disparities within it. The Black Panthers were hella sexist and misogynistic, ... Please stop Fed posting in the chat. I cannot comprehend when people unironically do the thing that, like, the FBI, well, failed to do personally. So they literally went and fucking killed the leadership. Also, it is white supremacy that forced the narrative that black people only accept handouts from the government. Yeah, welfare queens. Welfare queens was terminology that was specifically associating social programs with black people, even if white people still used fucking welfare. And of course, there are more poor white people in this country than there are poor black people. There are more white people in this country, right? So I think that it's a far more convoluted and complicated issue than like Bernie Sanders' optics. I think that there is a media component. I think there is a media component that is not necessarily addressed here, but it is definitely an issue. I still believe in the revolutionary potential of black communities. Black people have the highest unionization out of any demographic group in the United States of America. Black people have a higher percentage of unionized workers than white people. You know what I mean? There's a fucking reason for that. Regardless of American unions, kind of racist history too. So that's just, I don't know, it's a very complicated issue. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. Every time there's been an emancipatory movement in the U.S., white allies fuck black people over, so trusting someone like Bernie is not that easy. Well, it is easy if you're under the age of 30. If you're a black person under the age of 30, you like Bernie. I mean, that's just statistically true. You know what I mean? At least if you're a black voter. Like, what most people don't say out loud is that Bernie's policies overwhelmingly help the black community almost disproportionately, but most people are too busy defending socialism. Yeah, I have tried to explain that in many agitprop videos that I did at the Young Turks. It was one of the things that I identified early on. And it was really, really frustrating that like American media has like brainwashed people, everyone, into the weirdly racist framing that like only criminal justice initiatives are helpful to the black community. Like if you're not talking about like police brutality, you're not talking about black people. When you talk about socialized healthcare, well, that's a gift wrap to the Nazis, you know, the white working class. Like, bro, what are you talking about? Black people are disproportionately poorer than white people as a consequence of systemic racism. So, of course, they are going to disproportionately benefit, just like with criminal justice reform, they're going to disproportionately benefit from any kind of economic restitution, even if it doesn't personally target black communities. But beyond that, we should personally target black communities in the form of reparations. You know? What about other races? I mean, we talk about all the races. We're talking about intersectionality for the most part. But why? What about all of the other races? When we're talking about chattel slavery and the direct targeting of black neighborhoods, why? Why can't we just have a fucking brief moment where we talk about black people without motherfuckers chiming in and be like, what about all the other races? Shut the fuck up.
Americans who have no health insurance today, despite the fact we pay the highest prices in the world for health care.
I talked a lot about Bernie Sanders, but this is a common aspect of socialist messaging across the board. You are quite frequently hard-pressed to hear detailed discussion about race and other identity issues unless somebody forces it into the conversation, and even then it's usually reframed through the lens of class. And socialists have been...
But that's not a bad thing. I think that that's a good thing. What do I always say? One of the major problems with the Democratic Party is that one of the major problems with the Democratic Party is that, like, if you put trans issues first in a matter of like aesthetic, in an aesthetic like pandering way, and that's the only platform that you have, then you're not going to be able to help trans people anyway. Okay, you have to bring people on board through the lens of class because it hits the largest group of people possible. Okay. And then you have to be like, hey, you want healthcare? Then shut the fuck up about trans people. There's no harming trans people. Like, sorry, we're not doing that. But also, if you shut the fuck up about trans people, then you can shut the fuck up and get healthcare. You know? It's just, and what I'm saying isn't like anything crazy. It's just how you build coalitions. You have to give people what they want. You're not going to be able to win over racist motherfuckers. And you have to do that, by the way, because a lot of people are racist. You have to give them something that they need. You have to communicate to them that, like, they also need healthcare, even if you're a fucking racist person. And if you have an issue with that, or if you like the healthcare part, but you just hate the black person part, then you're fucked, okay? Then you're not going to be able to get healthcare. And beyond that, black people are targets of classist violence regularly. Because class, in most circumstances, supersedes any other dynamic. It's just the truth. That's why everyone intrinsically understands that, you know, if we're talking about privilege, right? Or if we're talking about who's in a better position overall in 2022, Oprah, a black woman, is in a better position overall than a white, able-bodied, homeless person, right? It's just the truth. Why? Because class is a more powerful dynamic in that regard. The only time when race overrides class is if the class is not even an issue to begin with. That's the reason why when you look at the performance of middle-class black people, and now I'm using class not in a Marxist term, but instead class in the capitalist term, okay? If you look at like a middle-class black person and their performance and a middle-class white person and their performance, then systemic racism plays an effect. Then privilege plays an effect. But that, to me at least, is a very simple way of explaining the reality that, like, yes, class and your material possessions put you in a better circumstance overall that will override, in many instances, the racial issues that you could experience. otherwise. You can't interpret a main effect if interaction effects are present. Bro, this dude. What the fuck? Dude, no way. Race play should be a crime. That's a childhood friend. Middle school is nothing. Race play is a sin. White knighting police officers. Wait, what? Maybe listen to the guy about to tell you why black people didn't like Bernie Sanders. Class and race are connected. Stop thinking of it as separate in the colonies. Economic infrastructure is also a superstructure. The cause is effect. You are rich because you are white. You are white because you are rich. It's complete bullshit to say fixing class issues would get rid of racial issues. I've never said that. I don't believe that that's the case anyway, but it would make it a whole lot easier. Nice bathroom. Did you ban this person because of their take on racial play? Is that what happened there? Is that what happened? Silencing someone? No, I'm just kidding. He said, bro, shut the fuck up. Literally, black men go to cash checks and then get arrested because the banks think they're lying. Race is in all aspects of our lives and is not overruled by class. Deport all whites back to Europe. Wait, why did you ban this person? I thought he was saying something racist. He wasn't. Damn, Nice Bathroom came after him because he said race play. He was anti-race play. That's fucked up. No, Nice Bathroom read what I read and thought that he was being racist, probably. I love how you can, Hasan, is a lib take to say handling class issues would deal with racial issues. I think that's completely foolish. Yes, it will help certain aspects of their lives, but saying that that's how you tackle racism is completely stupid. Racial issues need to be targeted specifically. Yes, racial issues need to be targeted specifically. I'm talking about building a broader coalition. In order to build a broader coalition, you have to bring in as many people as possible to that coalition. And the best way to do that is not by trying to fucking make every like white working class dumbass read fucking Ibram Kendi, okay? And I think judging by your prior fucking chat, judging by like the previous things that you wrote in fucking chat, you understand that. Yeah, dude, we're gonna do that by making every stevedore go and fucking do the dinner with that Indian lady who's like the $3,000 a pop, where like you have to sit there and be like, I apologize for my whiteness. You know, that's how we're going to tackle the racism problem. Like, liberals have no fucking answers for this. Okay? What is it called? Race to dinner? Law? Anyway. You're a real nice dude. People say you disagree, you agree, but you clearly not to reasonable people. What? Bernie and Elizabeth Warren were very awkward when addressing reparations in interviews with black people and were portrayed as racist because of their uncomfortableness. Yes. You know what's funny about that, though? What the fuck is Joe Biden's take on reparations? Joe Biden's like, I'm a racist, Jack. But it doesn't matter. It's about depiction, okay? It's about the media depiction of certain people. And the media does a very good job of weaponizing identity politics against people who literally have a better track record in addressing racial issues. But they're not fucking libs, right? So that's where it comes from. Anyway. I'm back, baby. Love you, Hasan. Deport all whites back to Europe. Look. Dumbass. Bro, we're just saying that if you want to message this class first plus racial issues, then fine. But that's what I said. That is what I said. Why aren't you hearing what I'm saying? Racial issues have to be individually targeted, okay? Absolutely. Because the historic wrong was done through a racial lens. You can't right the wrongs of history by being like, all right, we're just going to avoid it. Okay? Can't do that. So yes, you still have to make, I literally said, you have to, oh my God. I said these things. I'm repeating myself over and over again. Nobody listens to me. Because you are just as likely to just look at shapes and colors, okay, as anyone else sometimes. I'm saying that the best possible way to reach a broader coalition and a broader demographic of people and then get them on board with civil rights, get them on board with emancipation for marginalized people is by hitting the largest subgroup that you can point to, and that is class. I know you're saying that, but Bernie didn't message it that way. I know you're saying that. No, because Bernie did try to make that argument, except people didn't listen, and people still cut his shit out and made it seem like he was against it or something. Like the Jimmy Fallon clip. The Jimmy Fallon clip in and of itself is kind of showing that. Like Bernie literally is talking about like black people understandably are targeted disproportionately by the police. Like, we need to solve that. But then even beyond that, there are still larger economic issues that black people are subjected to. Like education, like healthcare. This is true. This is a true take from Bernie. Class analysis for white people can help them empathize with the struggles that people have on racial issues. A white person doesn't know what it's like to experience racism, but they sure know what it's like to be poor. Yeah. How is deport all whites back to Europe not racist? Because it's a fucking joke. And because there is literally no structural violence associated with that and no historical precedent for that. That's why. Why do you have to demonstrate your fragility every single time this happens? How many times do I have to describe it? Like, the anti-white rhetoric is unironically the exact same as the why is there no heterosexual pride parade? It's giving, why is there no hetero pride? Why is there no straight pride parade energy? I mean, you want to know how fucking silly that take is across the board? Because if you deported all the white people back to Europe, they would probably be in a better fucking position. You understand that? Because, hey, guess what? Predominantly white communities in Western Europe especially have kind of fucking dominated the planet for a long time. Do you not understand that? It's a little bit different than saying the opposite or a different version of that, right? Anyway.
Debating this for decades, by the way. This is by no means the first time the race issue has been raised, but it still seems to be a problem. Just ask the DSA. To some extent, this is to be expected. Socialism is at its core an economic theory, so you would imagine it would be economics focused. But when socialists describe their theory as being capable of solving social problems, which a lot of people would argue have causes and factors that are outside of the economic arena, I think that's where you lose a lot of people. And it's hard not to look at a movement that is so very white and not chalk this up to simply not understanding how racism works, because we already see white progressives do that shit all the time. This is actually a lesson I think socialists can learn by observing white progressives. Since black people disproportionately vote for Democrats and are black, I think a lot of people assume that the black community is super progressive and socially liberal, but you'd be surprised. According to a recent Pew poll, 68% of black American voters describe themselves as either moderate or conservative, a number that's stayed relatively the same for the past 20 years. Interestingly, the number of white voters who describe themselves as liberal has doubled in that amount of time. And I wonder if the influx of cringe, performative white progressives who don't know what the fuck they're talking about is part of the reason that black folks explore other political ideologies. Socialists, this is your chance to not be cringe. One of Hillary Clinton's main attacks on Bernie Sanders in their battle for the Democratic nomination was the insinuation that he was a single-issue candidate. At a rally in Nevada, she told the crowd, "Not everything is about an economic theory, right? If we broke up the big banks tomorrow, would that end racism?" Rolling Stone called that the line that may have won her the nomination. Sure, it's a huge straw man and somewhat awkward coming from Clinton, who was fairly cozy with Wall Street bankers, something emails. But it does make a salient point that many...
Or the fact that she like defended the defended the crime control bill and even justified it by saying black people were super predators, even flexed that she had literal black slaves working at the fucking Arkansas governor mansion and how wonderful that was. I mean, Hillary Clinton herself, before we get into Haiti, like Hillary Clinton herself is under the same lens of scrutiny. Look. Okay, listen. If we were to apply the same lens of media scrutiny that we applied to Bernie Sanders, nitpicking every single thing he said, and then refiltering it through the lens of like him being anti-women and anti-black, not a single Democratic Party candidate would ever fucking get a single goddamn vote. That doesn't happen. And then we literally talk about it in the aftermath as though like, well, there's a real bad messaging problem here. Okay? No matter what happens. There is truth to this though, regardless, because hey, guess what? Black people is the most solid voting bloc of the Democratic Party. And black people, especially older black people that are, you know, the most solid voters, are very much a fundamental part of the Democratic Party machinery in the South. Okay? There would be not a single fucking vote for a single Democrat without churches and without black leaders and without the media constantly pumping this fucking rhetoric. And people, for some weird reason, completely avoid that. That's multi-billion-dollar industry. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry in the form of media that everyone is fucking consuming. But more importantly than that, the most important building block of community building, especially in the South, is churches. And if the conversation that you're getting from black leaders is still pro-liberal, capitalist, Democratic Party adjacent rhetoric, yeah, you're not even going to fucking think about Bernie Sanders. There's an understandable level of skepticism towards Bernie Sanders as well. He is an old white guy. He and a bit of a curmudgeon too. So, you know, you look at a guy like that, and if you're like if you're like an older black person, you think like, well, that's the guy who fucking kicked me out of the store because I look different, because I look black. You know what I mean? But that same level of skepticism is never afforded to someone like Joe Biden, who was already tapped in. You know what I mean? He was already very much seen in a positive light by the black community by being Barack Obama's vice president. Yeah, Clyburn did this very effectively. He cut out propaganda against Bernie very effectively by saying, we know this old white person, we don't know this other one that well. It's a mistake that I have made too, where I'm like, dude, why don't people see how fucking racist Joe Biden is? At a certain point, you have to stop. You have to stop thinking about like why people are not understanding this. You just have to stop. Sometimes you don't have to be rational, okay? Sometimes you have to be emotional. Sometimes you have to pander emotionally. So I do get that. You understand? Doesn't he go down a contradictory path here, though, complaining about white progressives being out of touch with more moderate conservative black voters, but then lamenting socialists that are too economics focused? No, because older black people, older black voters are voting for the Democratic Party because the counter is inherently and openly racist, okay? Republicans do racial agitprop, and black people understand that. They see it. They recognize it. That is one identity issue they care about. Okay? The other identity stuff, like you know, LGBT or whatever, if they are older and more conservative or even more moderate on economic issues, because, hey, guess what? Some older black people also have a little bit of capital in comparison to younger generations. So there is that part too that most people are completely overlooking, like, you know, home ownership and whatnot, even though statistically speaking, it's still much, much lower in the black community. Okay. But that is a issue that they care about, understandably, because it's a existential threat. Okay. So that is how they get on the coalition. So my argument is almost identical. Older black voters who otherwise have conservative ideas recognize that voting for the Democrats will, at least in some ways, stop the existential threat of a Republican supermajority. And it doesn't even matter if Republicans aren't going to cut, like, you know, really, really overtly racist policy, which they do anyway. But even if they didn't, okay, they recognize it as the lesser of two evils. And they're doing defensive voting for the Democratic Party for that reason. I want to flip that on its head for other people to understand. I use that as an example. Even if you don't agree with the Democratic Party's platform, you still vote for the Democratic Party as an older black person because the other side is openly cutting agitated propaganda against you. Okay? So even if you don't agree with the Democratic Party's platform on LGBT issues, even if you don't agree with the Democratic Party's platform on other shit, I think that the best way to do coalition building is by using a class-first analysis and then getting people on board with that and then saying, hey, look, these are the other conditions. Shut the fuck up. If you want healthcare, you got to shut the fuck up. You want $10,000? Shut the fuck up.
These socialists have trouble addressing in a compelling way.
It's really hard to, I guess, present the kind of data and the kind of work that you're doing while simultaneously you're dealing with some of the most disgusting xenophobic and racist commentary and behavior from the right. So how do we overcome that to really share this message in a way that doesn't come across as dismissive of the, you know, lived experience of minorities in this country?
Yeah, $1 million question.
Now, inevitably, someone's going to read the title and then rattle off a list of prominent black socialists and black socialist movements. We can point out that many black leaders throughout history were socialists, like Martin Luther King Jr. probably, and W.E.B. Du Bois definitely, or how almost every socialist that's been elected to Congress has been a person of color. It's definitely true that racial movements are often informed by socialism. The Black Panther Party was a socialist organization, and critical race theory is heavily rooted in a socialist framework. And it's also true that the understanding of the intersection of capitalism and racism has evolved due in large part to black thinkers. In his pamphlet Toward a Socialist Theory of Racism, Cornel West, himself a black socialist, admits something that white socialists often fail to either notice or acknowledge, that although racist practices were shaped and appropriated by modern capitalism, racism itself predates capitalism. Racism is as much a product of the interaction of cultural ways of life as it is of modern capitalism, which is another way of saying that breaking up the banks won't end racism. West and
I don't know if anyone actually legitimately thinks that, by the way. I mean, I certainly do not. For those of you who are still wondering if that's your attitude or whatever, no, of course not. Just like unionizing a fucking factory is not going to magically eviscerate racism. However, statistically speaking, racial resentment is lower in unionized workforces, just like racial resentment is usually lower in urban environments. More importantly than that, however, the most important thing you can do with respect to socialism, let's say tomorrow we like abolish capitalism, okay? We seized the means of production and we gave it to the fucking working class. That would provide a pathway to eviscerate racism as well. Far better than capitalism can, because at capitalism, power is still absolutely centered around a few people that are recipients of intergenerational wealth, and have been profoundly lucky and have worked really hard, but meritocracy is not really real. And they can weaponize identity politics as best as they want to their own desires, to meet their own, to divide the working class if they want to do whatever the fuck they want with it. Just like with Brandon and student loan debt. Student loan debt in the $10,000 or $20,000 if you're a Pell Grant recipient was eviscerated by Joe Brandon in almost a singular act. That didn't happen because people fucking pushed Brandon, okay? That ultimately happened because Brandon fucking did it. Don't be fooled, as I said already.
And many other socialists of his ilk believe, nonetheless, that although a socialist society will not necessarily eliminate racism, it's still the best framework for attempting to do so. I've also heard socialists argue that anti-racism is necessary for socialism to succeed in the first place, as the working class is unlikely to unite against class oppression if their identity-based oppression is being ignored. By the way, these two notions are kind of at odds with each other, right? Like, does abolishing capitalism come before or after diminishing racism? No group is a monolith, of course. People have different views, especially the left, which is known almost as much for its infighting as its actual political arguments. But there are, of course, black socialists, as well as socialists that acknowledge racism and other social issues as legitimate problems that won't immediately be solved by the formation of a socialist society. All that being said, regardless of what you believe, getting on board with socialism seems to at some point require a colorblind economic solidarity that may sound like a choice between, hey, let's work together on my thing first, and then only after that will we work on your thing. Or we'll help you with your problems, but
no, I think class-based economic solutions are good for one, targeting a broader majority of the population. Two, literally still disproportionately helps out black and brown communities. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not. That larger coalition that you build on top of that can also better tackle racial inequality. I don't know why people make a one or the other thing. Like, class is at the foundation of intersectionality. Class at the foundation of intersectionality. It's not a either or thing. It's always there, whether we admit it or whether we don't admit it, okay? Whether we recognize it or not. And let me tell you something. You in the working class might not fucking recognize it, but I promise you, wealthy people do. They demonstrate class solidarity all the time. They demonstrate class consciousness all the time. Any single moment where like there's a tight labor market, you fucking hear all the business owners chirping like a motherfucker, all the way from the HVAC industry specialist with a small business, all the way to fucking Warren Buffett and the billionaires that go on CNBC. They know it. They demonstrate class solidarity all the fucking time. Typical, it's not talking over black creators. Sit your sometimes white passing ass down and listen to why you're wrong. I don't think we disagree on it much. I think that, I personally think he's not super charitable, but to Bernie Sanders, but ultimately it doesn't really matter because like he's right. A lot of people are uncharitable to Bernie Sanders. A lot of black people are, especially older black people, are uncharitable to Bernie Sanders. So and Bernie Sanders is a singular individual. Obviously, it doesn't matter if people are uncharitable to Bernie Sanders, but there are lessons to be learned there. There are lessons to be learned there, and mistakes not to repeat. Okay.
But only so you're freed up to help us solve the real problem. And black people have been dealing with Democrats paying lip service to racial issues while not doing a whole lot about it for decades. So a lot of us could be a little suspicious that we might once again be used as accessories for white people's goals. The point of this video is not really to analyze the merit of these types of philosophies, only to speculate about how they might sound to skeptical black folks, or perhaps people from other oppressed groups. Black people have
people being like, he's Jewish, or that like a lot of old black folks are anti-Semitic. Motherfucker, what are you talking about? Do you think old black people don't know Joe Biden is racist? They do. They end up voting for a fucking racist person, okay? They don't care. Like, even if they might be personally anti-Semitic or whatever, they're still going to vote for the best possible person for harm reduction, okay? Do you understand? That doesn't even matter. Like, that none of the things you're bringing up matters. Historically speaking, racism is the outcome of colonialism initially started by the Muslim kingdoms and then was institutionalized by the Christian European colonizers. Yeah, I know. Muslims invented racism.
I've watched white society, especially white men, thrive and experience this country from an advantaged position. So when an economic movement that mostly comprises white men tries to recruit and inspire black folks, it could come off sounding like, hey, we got to run the world for a long time, but it's okay now. We're ready to share. It's essentially a consolation prize. And maybe that's one of the things that needs to improve about socialist messaging in order to more effectively recruit black allies. If you ask Black America to describe the perfect utopia for themselves and their communities, I'm not so sure a lot of them are imagining sitting—
For the record, I don't even know if that the anti-Semitism thing I just like brush past. Like, I think it's ridiculous to be like, oh yeah, black people are this way, black people are that way. Like older black people are this way, older black people are that way. Okay, I don't even believe that that's true. I think that's like bullshit, but I don't think it's true. But even then, it doesn't fucking matter. Even if it was true, which I don't think it is. You know what I mean?
around the table, holding hands and sharing
That chatter saw black Israelites and we're like, oh, dude, wow, all black people are like this.
juice box with white people who have silenced and subjugated them for the entirety of their history in this country. I don't think most black people want social or economic domination over other groups in the same way that white people have enjoyed, but I do think many black folks feel owed something from America. Do socialists generally support reparations for slavery? I'm not even really sure. Y'all can let me know. But I'm sure there's many viewpoints. Part of the argument for reparations is that it should eliminate the racial wealth gap caused by centuries of oppression, so it would seem like they would consider it unnecessary under socialism, because in theory there would be no wealth inequality. But socialists also like to talk about the value of labor, and another major argument for reparations is that it is a settling of a debt owed for unpaid labor. I do know that most black people support reparation. You could argue that in a society without economic inequality, people would no longer feel a need for something like reparations. But as I implied, I think it's about more than financial equality. Outside of that, I think a lot of black folks simply want an opportunity to flourish and prosper. We want to move on up to the east side and get our piece of the pie. We want our Wakanda. It's unclear whether socialism actually provides or even offers this. Now, American capitalism is pretty bad at this. I think a good number of people have figured that out by now. But as I said before, it's the only thing that we've seen do it at all. And ambitious black Americans react to this by supporting liberal policies that retain those opportunities while slowly chipping away at the barriers that make them hard to achieve, and or developing and sharing ideas about the best ways to overcome the system with the tools we have available. And I don't really think you could blame us.
What? You're not agreeing with the message? You literally disagree on the messaging? What the hell is wrong with this chat? Snipe Black Chatter, please listen to the Black Socialists explain why Bernie's not captivating us. Can we hear more Black Socialist theory today? Finish the video or read my log. You have no options. You're prioritizing the broader coalition when at that specific moment the question is about black issues. Bernie's messaging wasn't good for the same reason. Chad's not understanding your nuance. But when can black voters voice their demands for specific reparations for the wrongs we've done? You're prioritizing the broader coalition. No. The broader coalition is only for winning fucking elections. Well, which, by the way, you can't win the primaries without black votes, obviously. Okay. Also, that person is not TJ is not a socialist. He is a social democrat. I don't even know if he likes Bernie all that much. I think he likes Bernie a little bit, but I mean, he probably does like Bernie. He just doesn't think that Bernie's good optics for black people. What? Jay Cortez is why we need more black content? What is this? Without slavery, these people would not be in the U.S. By this, I mean that if they were born in Africa, their chances of even coming to the U.S. is almost zero. Black people in the U.S. are already in a fortunate position, but want to push for more. As a Latin American, I do not want black people speaking for me. Yeah, the irony, of course, is that, the idea that like Africa always would be in the conditions that it is without colonial subjugation is a silly one. But you know, that's cool. Thanks. Also, no black people in Latin America, famously. No black people whatsoever in South America, as one knows. I made a video about socialism without even checking what the socialist viewpoint on reparation is. Typical fucking sock them. I mean, he's right about one thing, and that is that at the top of the hour, there's a 6-second ad break, okay? And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or for free with the Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, where you get one free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me, okay? That's right. Hopefully I'm your favorite broadcaster. Woo! You can also get gifted a sub if you're lucky. Here's the 1-minute ad break now. Speed Racer, thank you for the 5. Get the subs. What the fuck was I gonna say? Half a snipe chats were trolls. I did want to address the messaging as the main issue. Why are you talking about a broader onboarding in a specific convo? Because Bernie's talking about a broader onboarding in a specific convo. Bernie's running for, if Bernie Sanders is running for president, he's always going to talk about that. He's always going to talk about the broader coalition united against class subjugation and racial subjugation. Also, I think politicians are under a separate lens of scrutiny too. Anyway, I don't know. I wish there were better answers. I wish there were better answers in this subject. I wish I had better answers for this. But I'm white. Okay? I can't speak on this as adequately as I can on other things. I can talk about criminal justice reform, how black people are undermined through systemic racism all day, okay, till the cows come home. But ultimately, I cannot figure out, or rather, I cannot adequately communicate how best to communicate a socialist message, a socialist message to, as long as you didn't criticize him at all, he won't say anything bad about it. Wait, what? What the fuck? Everybody needs to chill the fuck out, dude. God, I hate people so much immediately. There's like so many whiny little annoying shitheads in the leftist, left Twitter. Like, lack of intersectionality has destroyed almost all revolutionary movements, aka ANC, NAACP, PAC. Roads must fall. What am I gonna say? Look at this. I hate the way people say white people. White people oppress me. Talk like that just unites the right. It's not white people's fault for being born in the world they're in. When you talk about historical context and just say white people, it alienates them. Is anyone surprised when white people don't want to join a movement that portrays them as an oppressor? Most white people don't want to oppress anyone. First of all, this is the most Caucasian motherfucking community on the planet. Shut the fuck up, okay? Like, if that was the case, and I shit on white people routinely, and I cast a I cast a wide net when describing white people because whiteness as a concept is a political one that literally revolves around having power and dominating and oppressing, okay? So shut the fuck up. God damn, bro. God damn. If that was the case, then I wouldn't have like an 80% white audience. You know what I mean? Now, according to Twitch, I am not allowed to say the word. Twitch doesn't view me as white enough, okay? But you got to understand. This is why we need to do more black content more often. Yeah, okay, well, you know, get ready because you're going to have to clap a lot of ass cheeks in here. I feel though the video would have benefited from taking a wider view of socialism instead of focusing specifically on Bernie. I think that TJ's criticism of Bernie Sanders, even if I don't agree with it, is still important. You want to know why? Because he's black. He's a black American who is a social democrat. He's the guy who votes for Bernie. And if the guy who is definitely going to vote for Bernie is still saying like, well, Bernie's not doing a good enough job communicating his desires to the black people, then yeah, he's not. He's not. There is a fundamental breakdown. Now, my job is to look at that and try to figure out what the fundamental breakdown is. Because do I think Bernie Sanders doesn't care about black people? Of course not. I think he does. Of course he cares about black people. As he also has shown historically by getting arrested at civil rights protests. You know what I mean? Like that's not something to overlook. At a time when the broad majority of white people despised black people and thought they were violent and were like pro-segregation, or even if they weren't pro-segregation, they still were like anti-fucking MLK. Bernie Sanders was not one of those white people. He's one of the good whites, okay? And he has the receipts for it. But I think it goes beyond that. Just admitting that or mentioning that is not enough, obviously. But I do think that there is a way to try to one of the good ones, Lamau. Yeah, like one of the good whites. That's what I'm saying. I'm doing racism. I'm doing anti-white racism. Okay, listen. Stop. Oh, yeah. There's no better. By the way, it's so funny because white people recognize that they are dominant regardless of how much they want to fucking seek out oppression. I'm talking about specifically conservatives in this circumstance, which is part of the reason why white people probably shit on white people way fucking more than any other group. And that's why I have an 80% white community despite constantly shitting on white people from a historical lens. Okay? I did support Bernie, by the way. Yep, there you go. Of course. Anyway, like I said, there is a breakdown in communication. I personally think that breakdown is partially backed by the media, partially backed by a lot of still very much liberal capitalist black leadership within the Democratic Party's infrastructure. This was a great video, TJ. And beyond that, though, I don't know how to break through. And I think part of it is still better representation in this field. Like, I think that there needs to be better representation, or any representation, not even better, just representation in general. I do think that like people immediately poo-poo identity politics in like leftist circles to a certain degree, but no, you need black faces in high places in some instances. I know that goes against Dr. Cornel West's argument against Barack Obama, but people that come from this background are going to do a much better job of communicating the desires to their own communities. That's literally what I try to talk to Chris Smalls about too. For the record, the black faces in high places is literally a diss on Obama by that's not a positive. For those of you who don't know the quote. There's better answers to this. Come to black communities on a regular biases or regular basis. Dr. Adolph Reed Jr. worked on Bernie's campaign. His views is a prominent historian of African American history. He gives leftist critique of reparations and Paul Seven on it. And his views on Bernie, his views on Obama are spot on.
For that. I think sometimes we get stuck in our discourse bubbles and forget that most people are just ordinary folks just trying to survive. People understand that our systems are broken, they're not stupid. But people also have a limited amount of extra time, energy, and resources. And unfortunately, the people who stand to benefit the most from an economic reconstruction are often the people who have the least of those things, which is, again, at least partially by design. And this is probably a big reason why movements like this, like most things, are dominated by high-income white people. This isn't to say that black people hate socialism or are closed off to the idea of it. In fact, surveys have shown that black people on average are very open to the idea of socialism. But the same surveys show that a lot of black people still have a favorable impression of capitalism. So if socialists actually want black people to show up at their meetings or join their revolution, they might need to do a better job communicating their commitment to treating racial oppression as a top priority and not a side quest, while at the same time making a clearer case for how American socialism can compensate for the centuries of oppression and violence that has economically devastated the black community. I'm not sure if "you can sit with us now" is gonna be enough. That's just me though. What do you think? I want to give a quick shout out to the homies Bourbon Summer Cartoon Crisis, Gabriella Young Me 69, Casey Hillstrom, and M Mintz. Check out the onejanitor.com/discord to discuss this video in our Discord community. Okay, that's the end of the video. Stay hako, bye.
I think yeah, that was T1J's video on why aren't there more black socialists. Be sure to go check it out and leave it a like. That doesn't necessarily work. We have caste quotas in Indian parliament. It has worked largely to uplift oppressed caste communities, but those leaders also end up being fucking pieces of shit and collaborate with corrupt oligarchs. Okay, got it. Aren't libs doing the "you can sit with us now"? I think so, but I think tying racial oppression to class oppression is the key here based off of what his critique is. I think they go hand in hand. No, I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing. Like, I think maybe I misunderstood, but I think what TJ was saying was specifically not to do that. That you have to address racial oppression uniquely and single it out and offer solutions beyond like talking about class, which I think people, I mean, I do it a lot. So that's why I get shit on by both the reactionary people, but also on top of that, I get shit on for not doing it enough when I talk about class-based analysis. Motherfucker trying to sneak in a lie when I'm watching Hasan. Why? What did he say? Tag me when Germa lies. What? Such a beautiful Twitch interaction.